expedition that would include a polar component believed there were many other reasons to launch such a voyage. Not everyone agreed, however.
There was no tradition in the United States federal government for funding science. The only other scientific expedition was the Lewis and Clark expedition of Thomas Jefferson. So this was something that was difficult to get through Congress, and it took until 1838 to have it funded.
The United States Exploring Expedition, 1838 to 1842, was our very first ever large scientific ocean research expedition. And at the time, it was the largest, most ambitious expedition that had ever been attempted in human history by anybody. It involved 6 ships, almost 300 men. It was the first expedition to take along scientists who were paid to work on behalf of a government to study the ocean. It had many, many different objectives. Part of the expedition's objective was to sign treaties with nations that at the time we had no treaties with. Part of the purpose was to explore places that had never been explored before. Also to investigate the possibility that there was one last continent at the very southern end of the globe, what we know now as the continent of Antarctica. And nobody had ever been there and actually mapped the continent before. They were also to collect marine specimens all over the world. They were to take soundings. They were to measure water temperatures. They were to measure currents. Everything and anything about the ocean that would be of benefit to the United States.
And the voyage went south along the Atlantic coast, around South America, up the western coast of South America to the Pacific, explored thoroughly the northwestern part of the United States. Then the ship went off into the Pacific through Hawaii, the South Sea Islands, and then back to the East Coast. But the work that was done on this expedition was really quite monumental.
The United States Exploring Expedition was phenomenally successful, far beyond their wildest dreams. They found whole new stocks of whales that nobody knew about. They recovered many, many species of animal, plant, fish that had never been seen before. They named hundreds and hundreds of species for the first time ever. It led to an era of discovery and understanding about the ocean that had not preceded that in all of history for any country, let alone the United States. It resulted in the basis for our educational system concerning the ocean, and it led to further expeditions to different places on the earth that the exploring expedition didn't happen to visit. So it's really the beginning of marine science in the United States.
Shortly after the U.S. exploring expedition concluded, Matthew Fontaine Maury, perhaps the first person for whom oceanography was a full-time occupation, began charting winds and ocean currents for the United States Navy.
And this basically was a pioneering effort in understanding the different currents that make up each ocean. That is, an ocean is not just one mass of water, but is the combination of many different flowing rivers, if you will, of water.
Maury produced a set of directions for sailing great distances more efficiently. His work quickly attracted worldwide notice. Today, Matthew Maury is considered by many to be the father of physical oceanography. Also notable for his oceanographic work in the mid-19th century was Charles Darwin. Although Darwin would later be primarily recognized for his revolutionary explanation of biological evolution, his voyage to South America and the Pacific on the HMS Beagle produced significant oceanographic results, including his work pertaining to coral atolls and reefs, barnacle biology, volcanic islands, and fossils. But it was the British Challenger expedition, a 4-year voyage begun in 1872, that would come to be known as the most impressive and important marine expedition ever undertaken. In large part, this recognition stemmed from the fact that it was the first sailing expedition devoted exclusively to marine science.
And the goal of this was to basically survey the oceans. By the second half of the 19th century, the oceans had, of course, been explored, but never in a systematic way.
The British Navy and the navies of a number of other nations had always taken measurements of tides from ships in the ocean. The most famous one, of course, is Captain Cook, who's known for a number of amazing voyages. However, they normally didn't carry scientists. Sometimes they carried naturalists like Charles Darwin on the Beagle. But there was no cruise devoted to oceanography until the Challenger.
In particular, they wanted to look at the plants and animals of the sea, where they lived, the relative abundance, how deep they lived, and so forth.
There was a scientist in Britain named Edward Forbes who postulated that the sea below a certain level could not sustain any life at all. This was a theory. And one of the reasons that the Challenger was put together is that they wanted to test that theory and find out if there were any living things below what was called the azoic zone of the ocean. However, the Challenger expedition was really an exploratory expedition. It was a 4-year circumnavigating expedition which wanted to take basic scientific measurements of the oceans, the currents, temperature, and dredge the bottom of the ocean.
For the 240 men who comprised the crew, the Challenger expedition was about more than just science. It was about survival.
There were about a dozen people killed on the expedition. It was a cruise that was very, very rough. They went to Kerguelen, which is one of the islands off the Antarctic. They encountered ice, dangerous conditions. They found 2 shipwrecked men on an island down there. It was a tremendously romantic but hard-working cruise.
The rigors of the voyage notwithstanding, the impact of the Challenger expedition can still be felt.
Much good science had been done by previous expeditions around the world, but Challenger actually took their collections off the ship. These collections were dispersed to scientists who then wrote specific reports on this type of specimen and this type of specimen. All of those reports were published in 50 huge folio volumes. The volumes then were put in libraries around the world, including this one, where it continues to be used by scientists today.
If the Challenger revolutionized what was known about the marine environment, it also changed forever the way marine science would be studied.
The Challenger really focuses for the first time the ocean as a systematic area of investigation, and then the need in doing that of a huge coterie of individuals who can evaluate the results of that type of investigation.
Unfortunately, once the Challenger expedition ended in 1876, there was no follow-up mission in place to carry on its legacy.
It was a one-time effort. The money was raised for the expedition, and a group of people was brought together and then went out and made the discoveries and so forth. There wasn't a plan for continuous oceanography, and oceanographers suffered for a number of years after that for the lack of ships. One of the reasons that shore stations such as this institution were built were to provide a place for scientists to gather together and make it possible to bring fresh specimens to them to study, and ultimately to build fleets so that scientists could go around the world continually.
As it turned out, the world's first oceanographic laboratories were not built in the U.S. or England. One of the earliest labs was actually established in Naples, Italy, at the Stazione Zoologica in the latter half of the 19th century.
Many people from around the world came to Naples to work in that laboratory, including a young man named William Ritter. A number of these people took a look around Naples and said, "This is fabulous, we must do this in our own countries." William Ritter returned to his native California and started an effort to establish a marine biological laboratory in California.
Ritter traveled to San Diego, giving a series of lectures and talking to anyone who would listen about his dreams for an oceanographic institution.